Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the virtual Bulldogs behind the scenes featuring our second look at the Hawk Ridge Bird Observatory. Well, my name is Molly Clevin, and I'm from the University of Minnesota Duluth Alumni Relations team. Today, we are going to learn more about the history and migration at the West Skyline Spring Count, as well as current raptor research projects. Now to introduce our guests. We are fortunate to have Janelle Long and Margie Menzies with us today. Janelle has served as the executive director at Hawk Ridge Bird Observatory since 2007. She received her MED in environmental education at UMD and a BS in wildlife management and biology at UW Stevens Point. She enjoys blending the bird conservation research, education, and stewardship components through her career with Hawk Ridge. Janelle lives in Duluth with her husband and 3 children. Margie joined the Hawk Ridge staff as a naturalist in 2011 and currently is the education program director. She loves birds, learning, and sharing the natural world with people of all ages. She has a BA in biology from Bethel University and an MA in education from the University of St. Thomas. In addition to her work with Hawk Ridge, she is also a naturalist at Sugarloaf Cove Nature Center in Schroeder, Minnesota during the summer. She is also an adjunct member at UMD in the education department, working mostly with student-teacher supervision. I will now hand it over to Janelle and Margie.
Great, thanks, Molly. And yes, thanks for having us back again for round 2 of the behind the scenes tour with our spring migration component with Hawk Ridge. I'm Janelle Long, the executive director of Hawk Ridge Bird Observatory. And then we also have our fantastic education director, Margie Menzies, here with us. Obviously, the best way for us to share the beauty and birds of Hawk Ridge with you is for you to come out and visit us in person during the bird migration, both fall as well as spring. Now is a perfect time with the weather finally warming up and plenty of birds migrating back north to their breeding grounds. Our part 1 behind the scenes presentation detailed the history, people involved, fall migration, count and banding research, education, and stewardship at Hawk Ridge Nature Reserve. We will share that video link for the part 1 of the presentation at the end, which we'd love for you to watch. But just a quick recap on who we are is Hawk Ridge Bird Observatory, the 501c3 nonprofit, which manages the Hawk Ridge Nature Reserve on East Skyline Parkway in a trust agreement with the city of Duluth. This is where our summer and fall research and education programs take place. Our mission is to protect birds of prey and other migratory birds in the Western Lake Superior region through research, education, and stewardship. We are a member-based organization, so we greatly appreciate your support. Thank you to all the members out there watching us today. Today, Margie will take you on a spring migration journey to learn about what drives spring migration in general in our region and here in Duluth. You'll hear from our banding director, Frank Nicoletti, who founded the West Skyline Spring Count, and why we count birds on the west side of Duluth during the spring versus the east side during the fall. You'll learn about our bird monitoring research at the West Skyline Spring Count, the parade of birds coming through different species at different times in the spring, and how, where, and most importantly, why we count birds. You'll hear from some of the UMD graduate students with updates on their cool raptor research projects in conjunction with Hawk Ridge, and you'll learn about our spring education programs and upcoming events, such as our big 50th celebration of Hawk Ridge this fall, which has been keeping me extra busy. So I'm glad we have Margie here to teach you all the exciting things about the spring migration. Fly away with it, Margie.
Hello, everybody. So why is Duluth such an amazing place to be watching migration? Well, this slide shows you that we are in the right smack in the middle of the Mississippi Flyway coming down. And yeah, I always think that it starts with us, but it doesn't. It starts up in Canada. But yeah, it's the beginning of a massive flyway. This slide kind of talks about that a little bit. Did you know you can geek out on bird movement, particularly at night, by looking at weather radar? And this map in the bottom right-hand corner shows you all those little round dots. That's the local radar picking up on all of the activity, and most of the time it's birds. The image on the left is 12 years worth of spring migration radar work. So you can see that Mississippi Flyway is a busy place. 60 to 75% of the birds that migrate in North America use that flyway. So it's a big deal. And yeah, Birdcast from Cornell Lab has taken geeking out with radar to the whole next level. They'll predict 3 days out to tell you what to expect. The lighter the map is, the more migration traffic you're likely to see. So this was the prediction last night from Birdcast. To see what actually came through, we'll go ahead to the next slide and see the morning after stuff. They can actually track what's happening as it happens. Last night, the flight was slower in the beginning and heavier after 3 o'clock this morning. Interesting. It was a huge flight. You can see that they estimate more than 4 million birds crossed St. Louis County last night. Unbelievable. So yeah, it's really fun to geek out with this stuff, and every day you can track and see what's going on. These birds are all hot to travel to their northern breeding territories. It's spring migration is all about getting to that breeding site, and these birds are well on their way. 4 million more anyway. This slide shows the boreal forest, and it shows the fall migration, but we know from our 50 years of banding and count recoveries that birds that are coming through Hawk Ridge area and here in Duluth are primarily birds that are breeding in the boreal forest. They migrate in the south, to the south in the fall, and we learned through recaptures of birds that they tend to stay in habitat as long as they can. You see that green band of the boreal forest. Birds from the west will track with that down, and birds from the east will also do that. And the end zone is the end of the boreal forest is pretty much right where they hit Lake Superior. So consequently, in the fall, birds are funneled right down the shoreline of the lake because they don't like to migrate over big water. Spring migration is a little different than the fall migration, and we're going to show you some of that sort of stuff. Spring route, birds use geographical hints, they use weather, they use habitats to determine how they're going to fly. And in the spring, they really don't have a massive thing like Lake Superior or the boreal forest to guide them. The main guideline there is the Mississippi River. Most of them are going to track with that up from the Gulf of Mexico. So yeah, counting. Here we are getting the spring hawk count starting. And going. In Hawk Ridge's case, we've been doing it for 50 years with the fall count, and now we're headed into 20 years in the spring count. Spring counting is kind of interesting. There are lots of places across North America that count birds in the fall, but not anywhere near as many in the spring. Only about a third will count in the spring. So yeah, how did we get started with spring hawk counts? Well, let's hear it straight from the person responsible for getting us started.
My name is Frank Nicoletti. I've been here in Duluth since 1991 when I started working for Hawk Ridge Bird Observatory. I came here to study the eruption of northern goshawks back in 91. I was only planning on spending 3 seasons here, which is generally what the goss eruption is. That's how many years it usually is. And I fell in love with Duluth. The migration, the people, the birds, the landscape. So I was still a migrant worker. I was coming back and forth from various jobs, coming here every fall. And in the summer of 96, I decided to move to Duluth that August. Packed everything up in my little Toyota pickup. That year, I met my now wife, and knowing I wanted to stay in Duluth, and I'm an old map person, looking at maps and looking at migration leading lines and things like that, I said there's got to be, if they come down, they've got to come back up. So my wife and I went out for a drive, and we picked a couple sites. And the first year I did the count for 97 and 99 at Enger Tower. And being on the Great Lakes, was one of the problems with the Great Lakes is when the land warms up, the cold air goes out on the lake, hot air goes out on the lake, comes back as cold air. So in 2000, I started the 2-site protocol, Enger Tower and Thompson Hill. And that's how it got going. So I started in 97 and went to a 2-site protocol in 2000.
This map will give you a little bit of an orientation. In the upper right-hand corner, that's our fall count site on the east side of Duluth. The 2 spring migration sites are the red dots further down to the left. We use 2 locations, as Frank indicated, largely because when that wind comes right off Lake Superior from either the east or the northeast, the birds are going to come more from the east, from the Wisconsin side, and otherwise we'll use the Enger Tower site. So let's hear from Frank a little bit more and get a quick tour of each of the count location sites.
So I chose these 2 sites, Enger Tower and Thompson Hill. The reason we use the Thompson Hill site is because of the cooler by the lake conditions. The migration will still continue, providing it's not so strong out of the northeast. And this site here, it's great because it's great uplifts here. It's a high bluff area, and a lot of the raptors come in from Wisconsin, which is very low. There's no topography at all, and they come and they pick up these ridges, and that's why they're here. Another reason they migrate through here is because we have lots of shorelines to the east of us to collect raptors, and most of them head our way, east, west, not east, like Whitefish Point, which is another migration site on Lake Superior, on the UT of Michigan. And if we were at Hawk Ridge, we're too far north to see the migration. So right around here, they come right over the bridges, come right over the landscape, and they come right at us.
I had no idea.
Yep. And so I've done this count 1997 to 2005 full time.
Wow.
And so I published 2 articles just talking about the migration.
So you got a little bit of the tour in that video with Frank, and could see a little bit more about the Thompson Hill site. And again, this is where we're going to be, and it's generally cold to be at Thompson Hill because that wind is coming right off the cold lake. We know that birds don't like flying over water a lot. We know that from our fall migration, and it still holds for the spring. They don't like coming over the lake. Our Enger Tower site basically is all the other directions of wind that'll take us to Enger Tower. And here we have a wider view of the whole flyway. You really see the whole St. Louis River basin, as well as the connection to Lake Superior. So let's take a look at the Enger Tower site.
They scare me. I know.
It's a phone, it ain't a camera.
You look great.
Yeah, that's what he says.
Ready when you are.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. It's April the 25th. We're having another lovely Duluth spring day. Chilly, snow squalls off in the distance. But this is the season where Hawk Ridge really starts to, the spring count starts to heat up. We start to see many more birds, much more diversity of birds than we see early on. The last time we filmed, we were in the early part of the migration and mostly seeing bald eagles. But yesterday we had a really nice early in the day flight and actually counted 13 species, and it was a tight race between the turkey vultures and the red-tailed hawks yesterday. They ended up about 2 birds apart, and the turkey vultures won. But lots more diversity of birds, and so it was a nice flight. It was a break in the weather that we've been having: wet snow, wet snow, wet snow, and we had a nice brisk south wind yesterday that really picked up the bird traffic. The bird cast from Cornell said that more than 3 million birds were estimated to.
So yeah, looking at that gives you a little bit of perspective on how we do these counts. One of the wonders of any migration is about the patterns that you see. So let's step back a little bit here, and now that you've seen the sites a little bit, and take a look at the spring migration from a more general perspective. I always think of it as a flying parade through the course of the spring. And spring, well, yeah, bird definition of spring and ours are often different. In this particular case, 2019, this is March the 31st, 2019. We would have already been doing the count for more than a month. Yeah, pretty big snow year. The official count starts every year on March the 1st, though often those bald eagles may get started even in mid to late February. So who's responsible for starting this parade? Well, I just gave it away. Those bald eagles, they give you hope in that late winter thing, and there are birds that are actually taking on winter and coming north anyway. There are big movers and shakers. And interestingly enough, we typically see more bald eagles in the spring than we do in the fall. And this particular spring, we had another just phenomenal record-setting day. We know how to celebrate St. Patrick's Day around here. At least the bald eagles did. March the 17th, we set a new North American record for the most bald eagles seen in a single day, 1,206. Just imagine the sky filled with that many bald eagles. And it was also our big golden eagle count day as well on the with 41. So what order do these birds come in? Well, we thought we'd give you a little opportunity to try that out. In your mind, I'm going to tell you who these birds are and then kind of order them as we go as to where you think they fit in the migration. The upper left-hand corner up there are trumpeter swans. In the upper right corner are red-tailed hawks. Lower right, that's a golden crowned kinglet. In the middle there, we've got northern harriers. And finally, in the lower left-hand corner, there's an osprey. So got them in the order you think they go in your head? Well, let's get the great reveal going here. Turns out the trumpeter swans are really going to start the parade with these 3, followed by red-tailed hawks. Next will be northern harriers. And believe it or not, those little itty bitty kinglets will often show up more closer or earlier than the osprey. So quite the parade going. So let's just walk through the raptor version of this parade and take a look. So I like to use this graphic to kind of illustrate who's coming when in the raptor world. If you look at March there, you'll notice on this graphic there are 2 different colors, green and blue. The green indicates adult birds. Spring is kind of the reverse of what happens in the fall. In the fall, we see the young birds first, and then the females, and then the males, and then tend to get the birds that are going shorter distances coming later. In the spring, we're going to see the adult birds. They are, again, hot to trot to get to that breeding territory. And if you look at March here, all you see is green, with the little itty bitty exception there of bald eagles, which get an earlier start than anybody else anyhow. So yeah, the first beginning of the parade wave is going to include golden eagles. That's the upper left-hand corner. We've got the rough-legged hawks that are Arctic breeders, and they come down here. This is the Arctic Riviera for them. bald eagles, and then finally in the lower right-hand corner, northern goshawks. And by mid-March, we've got another wave coming through. We're going to see the merlins in the upper left, sharp-shinned hawks, peregrine falcons in the right, and then in the middle down on the bottom is the Cooper's hawk. And it's one thing to watch these birds come year after year after year and count, but there are so many other questions that we have about birds and migration that we're working to answer. And we are really lucky right now to have 4 UMD graduate students who are doing raptor research. Let's start with Emily. She'll give us a quick shot about her research, and that includes those sharp-shinned hawks in the middle and the top, one of the earlier migrators.
Hi, my name is Emily Pavlovic, and my research focuses on estimating natal origins and migration patterns for hawks that are monitored during the fall at Hawk Ridge. So one of the amazing things about Hawk Ridge is the extensive long-term data set that's been created over 50 seasons of monitoring raptors. So each fall, about 60,000 raptors are counted and about 2,500 are banded with an aluminum band. And all of this monitoring has allowed us to learn a lot about migration patterns of these birds. However, one question that we don't know a lot about is where the raptors that pass through Duluth are migrating from. We know that most of the birds we band are coming from northern Minnesota and Canada, but exactly how far and with what patterns is not well understood. So the goals of my research were to estimate natal origins and also determine migratory patterns across the season. So to do this, I collected feathers from birds in the fall of 2020 and had them analyzed for stable isotopes. The information that we can get from stable isotopes can allow us to create maps of where the birds are most likely coming from, and then also determine whether there's patterns within their migration. So far, our analysis suggests that migration patterns are different between species and also sex of the species, and that some of our raptors are migrating from as far north as the Yukon or Alaska. So kind of the next steps for this research is to look at some of the other data that we collect during migration, such as environmental contaminants like mercury, and see if we can tell places of likely exposure for those birds. So with that, I thank you for listening, and thank you to all of the people and organizations who have made this work possible. Please feel free to reach out by email if you have any questions. Thanks.
March got kind of a slow start this year. Winter really has been hanging on in the North Country this year. And with the exception of bald eagles and golden eagles, March really didn't start out with much movement on the other bird species at all. But fortunately, by mid-March, things kicked up a little bit. And by late March, most years we'll see all of the adult raptor species. And they've usually started to move in a big way, but not so much this year. You can see from our graphic that as we get into March, we should be starting to see more of the young birds coming through, particularly peregrines, rough-legged hawks, golden eagles, and goshawks. So yeah, but this year we're a little behind. The next wave, kind of in the middle of the parade, includes American kestrels in the upper left corner. In the center there, turkey vultures, upper right, northern harrier, and in the bottom left, red-tailed hawks. Many of these birds are doing quite well, but American kestrels are a bird that we have our eye on. Their numbers appear to be declining. Let's hear from Hallie.
Hi, everybody. My name is Hallie Lambo, and my thesis is all about studying factors that may be influencing occupancy, productivity, and early life mortality at American kestrel nest boxes here in the upper Midwest. So a little bit of background before I really get into it. You may know that American kestrels are a small, colorful falcon species. They are fairly common throughout the United States, and they're also a secondary cavity nester, meaning they don't make their own holes to nest in. Rather, they typically use woodpecker holes, or luckily for us, human-made nest boxes. You may also know that kestrels are declining. So any of the red you see here on this map of the United States indicates population decline. And if we zoom in on Minnesota and Wisconsin here, we'll see that they're declining here as well. This is also an understudied region of their range. And so that's why I'm particularly interested in seeing how they're doing here in the upper Midwest. So my questions for this project are, does American kestrel nest box occupancy and nest success differ among sites? Does American kestrel nestling condition and survival differ with diet, so what they're eating? And finally, is American kestrel embryo and nestling survival influenced by weather? My plan for this project is to first monitor 475 nest boxes in Minnesota and Wisconsin. My sites are indicated by the stars on this map here. I'm also using eye-button temperature loggers in a subset of my nest boxes to record temperature data throughout the breeding season. Finally, I'm assessing the diet of nestlings through prey remains analysis and some stable isotope analysis of nestling feathers. So my broad goal for this project is really to understand if diet and weather are associated with differences in nest box occupancy or productivity in the upper Midwest. That's basically it. I wanted to thank my incredible collaborators and supporters for this project. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thanks so much.
Fascinating stuff. In addition, red-tailed hawks, now they're notorious for having lots of different color forms, and we're trying to get an answer to why there are differences. You can see from these birds in the upper left-hand corner, that's a very light colored bird compared to the center and the left side or the right side of the screen. They look differently. Why are they different? Well, Allie, another UMD grad student, is working to find some answers to this in a really cool way.
Hi, everybody. My name is Allie Pisano. I'm a third-year master's student here at UMD. We are looking at probability assignments, population structure, and phenotypes of migratory red-tailed hawks in Minnesota. Minnesota is located in the eastern subspecies range of red-tailed hawk. Here we see during the breeding season a lot of light morph birds. Whereas if you were to go westward, you'd see both light and dark morph birds. During migration, however, we see dark morph birds, light morph birds, heavily marked light morph birds, and lightly marked light morph birds. So we are trying to understand if there is any way to deduce where these birds are coming from with microsatellites. The three main questions we're asking are, what are the subspecies origins of Minnesota's migratory red-tailed hawk population? Is there population structure within the eastern subspecies, meaning can we see heavily marked birds and lightly marked birds being distinctly different genetically? And overall, how do subspecies phenotypes match their genotypes? Is there a consistent pattern we see with certain phenotypes to genotypes? We've collected a lot of data over the years, morphological measurements, plumage photos, genetic data via blood, and satellite transmitter data. So we've done this for both migratory and breeding bird populations. We've extracted the DNA, we've gone through microsatellite processes, and now we're currently in the data analysis phase. And within the data analysis phase, we have some preliminary results to answer our three main questions. These are very preliminary, and I just wanted to give you a glimpse of what we're looking at, but hopefully more to come in the future here. And with that, I wanted to thank you for watching and thank all of these people and funders that have supported this project along the way. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a great day.
So April, the red-tailed hawks get moving, and we did have a really nice April flight for turkey vultures and red-tailed hawks. And interestingly, our northern harriers are above their season average with 69 through the month of April. There's been some more for May. So we are working towards the backside of the parade now. Now we're looking at May and actually even on into June. And you'll notice that the color scheme has turned mostly blue. Most of the adults of the other bird species have come through, but there are a couple of exceptions to that, and you'll meet those shortly. But But yeah, now we're seeing a lot more younger birds, and they may or may not be breeding this year. Part of the reason why they're coming later. Osprey on the left and broadwing hawks are really kind of the back of the raptors anyway, the back of the parade for that. Osprey are really interesting. These birds will often stage on Lake Superior and open rivers while they wait for the ice on the inland lakes to clear. And that's definitely going to be the case this year. Broadwing hawks are some of our longer distance migrators, often coming from Central and South American wintering sites. And their unique dietary preference for reptiles and amphibians makes them come later as well, because it's pretty tough hunting for those guys through the snow. So yeah, in the month of May so far, we haven't seen too much of it, but it looks like there's a lot of catching up to do. And yesterday, the broadwing hawks did a major job of catching up. And we'll see a little bit more information about that. But we definitely had by far the biggest count in a single day yet this season, with 2,618 broadwing hawks alone and 3,000 birds, more than 3,000 birds total for the day. So the count went up by a lot yesterday.
And one of the neat things that we found was the migration is different for some species in the fall than in the spring. So your soaring birds like turkey vultures, eagles, red-tailed, broadwings, things that are like that actually come back this way. But some of the species like northern harriers, goshawks, sharpshins mostly go east. And we know that, and they go to Whitefish Point. We know that because we have band recovery that we exchange regularly between the two sites, and owls too. So some species we see almost nearly identical numbers, maybe even slightly higher in the spring than we do in the fall, and some species we don't. Really surprisingly were northern goshawk, which is a short to medium distant migrant, meaning they don't migrate down to Central South America. They may only go down to southern Minnesota, and a lot of those do not come by here. We only have a 4% return rate, meaning for every 100 that come down, we only see 4 coming back. There's various factors for that, but sharpshin's about 27%, but red-tailed eagles is 100%. And in the spring, the urgency is more about getting on the breeding grounds. So we seem to have like weather, we'll get a couple of good days and the majority of the birds will come through those days. Days like today, there won't be a lot.
Okay.
They're very energy efficient, but they're very explosive. I mean, sometimes they'll run until dark.
Pretty much.
So yeah, thanks, Frank, for giving us a little bit more about how spring is different than fall. Yeah, not all raptors soar well. It turns out, I always call them flappers, the birds that are built for speed and maneuverability, like the falcons and the accipiters and the harriers. More often than not, when you see them flying, they're not going to fan out their tails, and their wings are typically shorter. In the case of falcons, pointed or broader in the broadwing hawks, but not as long. So they fly differently and they don't soar quite as well. So these birds don't tend to come back through this direction in the spring migration as regularly as our soaring birds that will have those big, broad, wide wings and fanned out tails. So yeah, watching the behaviors of the birds, the efficient flyers, the ones that can really make use of the wind currents and the updrafts are the ones that we see more of in the spring. Duluth, part of one of the wonders that brings a lot of these birds through here, I think, is because it has all these great hills and topography. And it turns out in the world of flying and getting lift, you will always get lift from a hillside. Doesn't matter which way the wind is coming from. And so these birds, these soaring birds, are taking advantage of that. But Not just the raptors, many other birds are using this flight way as well, and we count all the birds. So there's lots of other highlights. Highlight some of my favorites here. Sandhill cranes have been coming through now for about a month. Tundra swans that breed all the way up in the Arctic Circle are just getting started. Pelicans are one of my favorites. I love watching pelicans fly. And like the osprey, they're going to stage on open water. And it's not unusual for pelicans to spend up to a month on the St. Louis River before heading on to the north, again, waiting for the water and the ice to thaw from the lakes. Waxwings. Another great bird to watch through. The Bohemian waxwings are still coming through. In fact, I saw some on a morning walk this morning yet. Last year, the bird that won the most birds seen of all of the birds, most birds counted, was actually Bohemian waxwings. Not going to be the case this year, I don't think, unless they really do a late season pitch here, but the red poles are giving them a run for their money right now. So it'll be interesting to see how it all turns out. And as the spring goes on, we will pick up more and more warblers, flycatchers, shorebirds. Other birds are going to come through. And that amazing part of the migration is yet to come. Lots of numbers. Just to give you a heads up on what's happened so far, the top 10, I always like to follow that and see what's happening. You can check this out on our website. Go on the website and look for the up to the moment count update, and that'll tell you what's going on. This year, the top 10 right now is bald eagles, followed by red poles, and those broadwing hawks. Yeah, they moved from 10th place yesterday to 3rd place this morning with 3,617 for the year. Mallards are in there, robins, lots of robins, and red-tailed hawks also did some moving up the scale yesterday. Had a nice red-tailed hawk flight as well. Ducks, sometimes when there's a lot of ducks flying through, it's hard to tell. So ducks, SP, stands for ducks that we couldn't identify from a distance. Canada geese have been, and yep, those Bohemian waxwings, they're not at the #1 spot this year, but they're still hanging in there and being part of the top 10. So here we are at our spring operation, and you can see Sean, one of our counters, has got all the gear on his trunk there, quick reference to the tablet there so that he can instantaneously update the count. He's got his camera close by, scanning the sky with his binoculars and honing in if he needs to take a closer look with his scope there. Our counters are hired because they have just amazing skill with identifying the birds by flight patterns, their shapes, behaviors, markings. Sometimes we'll hear them, that's a wonderful thing, and also the timing of the year that they come through. So lots of things involved. And while all this counting is going on, our education staff are busy teaching visitors, visiting schools, and teaching on-site field trip groups about the stories of the birds that we see. Here we are at the UMD campus at the Bagley classroom and teaching UMD students about how to identify raptors by shape and behavior. Some of them were ready to learn how to fly like raptors. How about bald eagles? SOAR. All right. Turkey vulture. V is for vulture. Tippy. All right. How about osprey? Yeah, that one's gonna soar pretty well too, but it's gonna be like this with that bent elbow. But not everything happens just in the fall and the spring. Hawk Ridge has research going year round. We are headed into the songbird breeding season, and every year we are participants in MAPS, Monitoring Avian Productivity and Survivorship, which runs through early June through early August. And we also have things going on over the winter time. We're going to end our grad student research team with Hannah Tutongi's research on northern hawk owls. So let's take a look.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Tutongi, and I am a graduate student at the University of Minnesota, Duluth. And I will be talking with you today about northern hawk owls and their winter ecology and movement. Northern hawk owls are one of the least studied birds in North America. They're both eruptive and nomadic, and their winter ecology is largely unknown. In terms of key questions, I will be looking at what is the winter range of hawk owls and do they have microhabitat preferences? Does prey selection become more diversified in the winter? And can a species distribution model accurately predict microhabitat preferences of individual owls? In terms of what we've done so far, we've put out 10 GPS transmitters, 3 in Minnesota and 7 in Manitoba. The habitats where these birds were captured varied. There were quite a few in black spruce and tamarack bogs, farmland, and deciduous forest, which was surprising. So it'll be interesting to see what those microhabitat preferences look like. The effort that was put in was from December 28th to April 1st. We drove over 10,000 miles, over 800 hours, and 12 volunteers made this field research possible. Here's a quick snapshot into the lives of 2 hawk owls that are part of the project. They were originally banded in Roseau, Minnesota, and then their current location is about 600 kilometers north near Lake Winnipeg. So it's just really interesting to see how this technology is working, and it's allowing us to sort of peek into the lives of these birds that previously we really knew nothing about in terms of their movements. So super exciting. In terms of key takeaways, it's important to study difficult to study birds. Our methods are working, so we are getting some really good results. It does look like hawk owls have defined winter home ranges, which is a novel finding. And down the line, this could have some conservation and management implications. A quick shout out to all of the field staff that helped me during this research. And then in terms of acknowledgements, Hawk Ridge Bird Observatory, University of Minnesota Duluth, and the Natural Resources Research Institute, and all of my funding sources made this research possible. So a huge thank you to you. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.
Well, we may be getting into the last serious month of spring counting. We officially end the count on May the 31st, but there's still plenty of time to get out for the spring, and especially this year. I think there's a lot more action to come. So yeah, I'm going to turn things back over to you, Janelle, to highlight some of the events ahead and kind of wrap us up here.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Margie. Wow. So much to continue to learn and be inspired by in the world of birds. We do have some great upcoming events for you to do just that, and we invite you to join us. We've been holding monthly virtual programs and field trips as part of our Pick a Bird Brain series. These are a la carte, so you can register for any of the virtual programs or field trips as you choose to. The virtual program next week on Tuesday, May 17th is on New World birds, warblers and sparrows. Next weekend, we have a birding field trip on Saturday at Park Point to search for warblers, sparrows, and other spring migrants. Then on Sunday, May 22nd is our Duluth Community Day to come out and predict how many birds will fly that day and learn more about the spring flight, especially if you still want to catch the excitement of the spring migration and visit the West Skyline Spring Count. We will conclude our West Skyline Spring Count on May 31st, so we hope you join us before then. Field trips and virtual programs will continue June through August, and then we start our busy fall migration season with our bird migration count banding and research starting August 15th through November 30th, and our education programs and visitor services run September 1st through October 31st at Hawk Ridge Nature Reserve. Then our big celebration event, September 22nd through the 25th, is the celebration of the 50th anniversary of Hawk Ridge Nature Reserve and 50 years of raptor research and education. This is in conjunction with our annual Hawk Weekend Festival, so we'll have lots of fun things happening throughout those dates. We are excited to celebrate the past, present, and future of Hawk Ridge and invite you to join us for that. And then Margie's going to give a quick overview here, since this is a second exciting trip that we are currently holding for this October. So I'll let her share a little bit more about you with a Panama trip.
Yeah, I was lucky to be able to go to Panama last year with a group of birders sponsored by Hawk Ridge. And oh my goodness, did we see birds. They don't call it the River of Raptors for nothing. The day that we went to the Ancon Hill hawk site in Panama City, they counted more than 120,000 turkey vultures alone. Unbelievable. Birds from as high, from as low as you can see to as high as you can see, and just an incredible tour of all the different kinds of habitats and some very, very unique birds in Panama. So if you're interested in something like that, take a look on our website. The information about the trip is there, and we would love to have you join us for this fall's trip to Panama.
Yes, and then I just wanted to put a little pitch out there for some of you that might be watching, or you might know someone. We are currently hiring for the fall bird migration season. So we're looking for those fun bird loving people that would maybe want to help us out as a bird migration counter, a bander, naturalist with our visitor services, and even those that are maybe recently graduating from college and looking for more in-depth training experience within the field. We do have traineeship opportunities within each of those areas as well. Volunteers are always needed too. We love our volunteers that help us out during the fall and throughout the year, and all of that can be found on our website. And yes, definitely feel free to reach out and contact us. Our contact information is here. You can find us on our website, on Facebook, email us, call us, whatever method works, and we're happy to connect with you. And here's what we promised to, that link to watch our part 1 version from the fall bird migration and a bit more on the history of Hawk Ridge Nature Reserve and Hawk Ridge Bird Observatory. So we encourage you to watch that as well. And we're at that point now where we are happy to answer some questions. So we will bring Molly back in to help us with that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for that wonderful presentation. So we are now transitioning to the question and answer portion of the webinar. On the bottom of the screen, you can submit your question using the Q&A button. So feel free to use that. Otherwise, the chat box works as well. There were a few questions that were submitted through the registration that we have a few minutes to answer here. So we'll just dive right in. The first question asks, compared to 50 years ago, is the migration date similar or much earlier or much later?
You want to take that one?
That's a great question. Yeah, and so that is something that people are very interested in looking at now with climate change, the phenology, seasonality of migration. And so I think it depends on species. I know that there is evidence that some species are coming in at later dates. There's variance in where those birds are moving to. And so, both with going up back into their breeding grounds, those breeding grounds may be expanded further north than what they had been. And so, yeah, there's really great information that's out there. And with our 50th celebration this fall, that is something that we will be talking about. So we have, as part of our 50th anniversary weekend, that Saturday evening at UMD, we are going to be talking about 50 years of raptor research at Hawk Ridge, as well as the future of raptor conservation. So there'll be more to come on that. Registration will open in June. So we encourage people to join us for that too.
And I'm just going to tag and say every year depends on the year. This year, winter has had a hard time letting go. Other years, it's not quite that bad. So the birds are some of them are going to respond in kind as well.
We had a few questions in regards to the bird flu. Wondering how, if the flu affects migration this year. So part 1 to the question, how it affects migration. And then the second part is wondering if there's any things that people should be aware of when leaving bird seed out and maybe not mixing in the sugary hummingbird food, if you have any advice on that.
Yeah, and that's a very hot topic right now, and one that we are continuing to monitor and discuss. We've had that come up within our research committee meetings. It's something that we have been referring and closely listening to the experts that are dealing with the pathology and directly dealing with the disease with wildlife rehabbers, such as the Raptor Center. The Minnesota DNR is another great resource for that. The bird banding lab, they are all on top of that, and it's been devastating, just from what we have heard so far. So it is something that we are continuing to watch and look at, and we're hoping that, things fare well for the birds, but, for most of the birds that it is hitting, there is high morbidity associated with that. So, having us out there in the field and doing this bird migration research, that's something that's helpful. It helps put some of those pieces to that picture back together. We can start looking at, if it has had an impact on any of those specific species and populations. And so that's, again, it's still early in the stages, so we're not quite sure what that overall impact's going to look like. But I think as we go, into our fall migration season and looking at those counts and analyzing some of that will be helpful to know more about.
Yeah, as of right now, we don't have much information, particularly about how this variant of the avian flu is impacting passerines. So we have not had any recorded cases in St. Louis County yet, but that's just a matter of time. But as far as hummingbird feeders and things like that, I would just keep an eye on the news, keep your hummingbird feeders and your suet feeders going until you hear that there's a problem. Those are less likely to be problematic for these birds.
And with feeders too, always good habit is to make sure you are keeping them clean. That's important, raking up seed underneath the feeders, just keeping that, those feeders in a safe space for the birds is always good habit with feeding.
Thank you. Wondering a little bit about technique and strategy to seeing the most birds. So again, two parts to this question. What is the best time to see the most birds in Duluth for the spring migration? Is there a specific time of the day that you should head out? And then what is the best way to prepare for seeing birds?
I would say that typically in the spring, the heaviest volume and the greatest diversity is usually going to be late April. But I think this year it's going to be more like early to mid-May, just with the lateness of things. What you want to watch is kind of, spring is a little different. Birds, many of them will move no matter what's going on with the weather, because again, they've got an ultimate driver under there, get to that breeding territory. And so some of the other things that we see in the fall, like setting back and waiting for better weather, doesn't happen as regularly as it does in the spring. So look for that good window. Also look for a good break in the weather. Wind from the south is a great thing that helps give those birds a tailwind versus a headwind to migrate through. So look for that change in the weather and that shift just before a big front starts to come through in the spring is a great time to come out to check out what's happening.
And I think we'll end on this question. Wondering, how do bald eagle counts today compared to the counts taken at the beginning of the Raptor program 50 years ago in 1972?
Huge difference. In the world of bald eagles, that's a massive success story. Back in 1972, bald eagles were hard to be seen in many, many, many locations. And the trend has been nothing but up since we've outlawed DDT in this country. It's not outlawed worldwide, note, but it is outlawed in this country, and that's made a huge difference. And we continue to see bald eagle populations soar, literally. We set the previous North American record just 2 years ago in 2020, and we broke it again in 2022. So that's all on the good side. And golden eagles are doing that as well. On our website, you can hook up with, you can geek out a little bit by going to our site. There's an option on the Hawk Migration Association, a North American web page that we link directly to. Go to that and go to the site information about Hawk Ridge, and there you can see the usual trends and when those birds peak, and it'll also link you to the raptor population index graphs for our site specifically, and which birds we're seeing do really great recovery, and which birds are staying steady, which birds are falling down a little bit. All of that stuff's just fascinating stuff to watch, and it's all there on the website. If you wade your way around a little bit, you can find that.
Our live count button, the Hawk count button on our homepage are where you can find those.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you both for giving us this unique opportunity to learn about the spring migration in Duluth. Hawk Ridge plays such an important role in our community, and we're lucky to have you both here to give us a little insight into that. And again, a big thanks to Janelle and Margie, and we hope that you'll join us again for future online events. Thanks and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.